The morning Sarah Martinez received the call that would change everything. She was elbow-deep in breakfast chaos. 8-year-old Emma was refusing to eat her cereal because it had gotten soggy, while 6-year-old Tyler was attempting to feed his toast to their elderly cat, Mr. Whiskers. The phone rang, just as Sarah was trying to explain why cats shouldn't eat butter. Sarah Martinez speaking. She answered, balancing the phone between her shoulder and ear while rescuing the toast from feline consumption. Ms. Martinez, this is Director Chun from the Xenobiological Research Institute. We need your expertise immediately. There's been a development that requires your unique background in interspecies communication. Sarah paused, her hand frozen halfway to Tyler's sticky fingers. She hadn't worked for the Institute in 3 years. Not since her divorce, when she'd chosen to focus on raising her children rather than traveling to distant research stations. Her specialty in xenolinguistics and empathic communication had made her valuable, but not valuable enough to justify the separation from her kids. "What kind of development?" she asked, finally, wiping Tyler's hands with a damp cloth. "We have a dying Draknari on our hands, the last of his kind, and he's refusing all medical intervention. Our translators can't get through to him, and our empaths are overwhelmed by his grief. We've heard you've had success with traumatized alien species before." Sarah's blood ran cold. The Draknari were legends among xenobiologists. Ancient, powerful beings that resembled the dragons of human mythology, but far more intelligent and emotionally complex. They were also supposedly extinct, wiped out in a plague that had swept through their homeworld decades ago. "That's impossible," she whispered, watching Emma finally take a reluctant bite of cereal. "The Draknari have been extinct for 40 years. Apparently not entirely. This one appeared 3 days ago at the edge of our solar system, barely alive. His ship was failing, his body is shutting down, and he won't let anyone close enough to help. Ms. Martinez, if there's even a chance of saving him, we need to try. The knowledge he carries, the history of his people, it could be invaluable." Sarah looked at her children, so small and dependent on her. Emma's big brown eyes, inherited from her father, looked up with concern as she sensed something was wrong. Tyler had abandoned his breakfast entirely and was now trying to build a fort out of cereal boxes. "I can't leave my children," Sarah said firmly. "I'm all they have. We understand your situation has changed since you worked with us. That's why we're prepared to make special accommodations. The Institute has excellent childcare facilities, and this assignment would be based at our main campus. Your children could stay with you, attend our school programs. We wouldn't ask you to leave them." Sarah felt a familiar tug in her chest, the call of work that had once defined her. Before David left, before the messy divorce, before she discovered that her ex-husband's idea of co-parenting was sending birthday cards twice a year. She'd been good at her job, really good. She had a gift for understanding the emotional undercurrents of alien communication that most translators missed. "How long would this take?" she asked. "We don't know. He's dying, Ms. Martinez. Our medical team estimates days, maybe weeks at most. But he's fighting our help, and without understanding why, we can't save him." Emma tugged at her pajama sleeve. "Mommy, who are you talking to?" Sarah covered the phone. "Work, sweetheart. Finish your breakfast." She walked into the hallway, lowering her voice. "What makes you think I can succeed where your other specialists have failed? Because you don't just translate words, Sarah. You translate hearts. This Draknari, he's not just physically dying. He's spiritually broken. Whatever happened to him, whatever he's carrying, it's beyond linguistic barriers. We need someone who can reach the part of him that wants to live." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of decision. She thought about her small apartment, the bills piling up despite her part-time teaching job, the way Emma sometimes asked if they were poor. She thought about the dreams she'd had as a young graduate student, of bridging the gap between species, of being part of something bigger than herself. "If I agree, I want full autonomy over the approach. No interference from other departments, no pressure to rush. And my children's safety and comfort come first." "Agreed. Can you be here by this afternoon?" Sarah looked back into the kitchen, where Tyler was now wearing a cereal box as a hat, while Emma giggled despite herself. We'll need time to pack. Tomorrow morning. Thank you, Sarah. I know this isn't easy, but you might be his only hope. After hanging up, Sarah sat down at the kitchen table with her children. Emma immediately climbed into her lap, sensing the seriousness of the moment with the intuition that 8-year-olds possess. Are we moving again? Emma asked quietly. Just for a little while, baby. Mommy needs to help someone who's very sick. We're going to stay at a special place with scientists and doctors. Is it going to be scary? Tyler asked, his 6-year-old imagination probably conjuring images of laboratories and monsters. No, sweetheart. It's going to be like a big school with lots of interesting people. And you'll get to meet someone very special, someone who comes from very far away. Sarah spent the rest of the day making arrangements, calling the school, packing their belongings. As she folded clothes and gathered toys, she found herself thinking about the Draknari. What had brought the last member of an extinct species to human space? What is he running from or searching for? That night, as she tucked her children into bed for the last time in their little apartment, Emma asked the question that had been weighing on Sarah's mind. Mommy, what if the sick person doesn't want to get better? Sarah smoothed her daughter's hair, considering the question seriously. Sometimes, sweetheart, when people are very sad or hurt, they forget that there are still good things in the world worth living for. Sometimes they need someone to remind them. Like how you reminded me that making friends was worth trying after Daddy left. Sarah's throat tightened. Emma had been so withdrawn after the divorce, convinced that if she wasn't lovable enough to make her father stay, she wasn't worth anyone's friendship. Exactly like that. The next morning, as they loaded their car with suitcases and Mr. Whiskers in his carrier, Sarah felt the familiar mixture of anxiety and excitement that came with stepping into the unknown. The Xenobiological Research Institute was only 2 hours away, but it felt like they were traveling to another world. The Institute's main campus sprawled across several acres, a mixture of gleaming modern buildings and older structures that spoke to decades of research and discovery. Security was tight, but friendly, and Sarah was impressed by the family-oriented facilities they passed on their way to the main administrative building. Director Chen met them in the lobby, a small woman with kind eyes and an air of barely controlled urgency. She greeted Emma and Tyler with genuine warmth, showing them the children's wing with its educational programs and play areas before leading Sarah to her briefing. He's in Medical Wing C. Director Chan explained as they walked through corridors lined with windows that offered glimpses of various research facilities. We've given him the entire east section to himself. The space requirements alone. Sarah, he's magnificent. Even dying, even broken, he's the most incredible being I've ever encountered. They stopped at a viewing window, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The creature beyond the reinforced glass was indeed magnificent. Even curled in what was clearly a position of pain and despair, the Draknari was easily 20 feet long, with scales that shifted between deep blue and silver in the artificial light. His wings, folded tightly against his body, showed evidence of old wounds and recent damage. But it was his eyes that captured Sarah's attention, ancient golden eyes that held depths of sorrow she could feel even through the barrier. We've tried everything, Dr. Yamoto, the head of xenobiology, explained as he joined them. Medical intervention, pharmaceutical solutions, even experimental treatments. He responds to nothing. He won't eat, barely drinks, and actively resists any approach. Yesterday, he managed to generate enough bioelectric energy to knock out 3 medical technicians who tried to force treatment. What about communication attempts? Sarah asked, unable to look away from those golden eyes. Our linguistic team has tried every form of Draknari language in our databases. He responds with single words at best, usually variations of no or leave. Our empaths can't get past his emotional barriers. The grief and guilt he's carrying is overwhelming. Guilt. Sarah turned to face the doctor. What would he have to feel guilty about? We don't know. But according to our empathic specialists, It's not just survivor's guilt from being the last of his kind. It's something more specific, more personal. Sarah studied the creature again, noting the way he held himself, the careful positioning that spoke of someone trying to contain pain while maintaining dignity. She'd seen similar postures in traumatized children, the way they curled inward when the world felt too big and threatening. I'd like to read everything you have on Draknari culture and psychology, and I want to see his ship. His ship is barely functional. Our engineers have been trying to understand the technology, but it's so far advanced beyond anything we've seen. I'm not interested in the technology. I want to understand his journey. What brought him here, what he left behind. Sometimes the path to healing starts with understanding the path to breaking. They spent the rest of the day in briefings. Sarah learned that Draknari society had been built around family units called wings, groups of related individuals who shared not just blood, but empathic bonds. The loss of one member was felt by all, and the loss of an entire wing was considered a catastrophe beyond healing. This Draknari, who had given his name only as Kirathen, was not just the last of his species, but the last of his wing. That evening, in the comfortable family quarters the Institute had provided, Sarah helped her children settle into their new temporary home. Emma was fascinated by everything she'd seen, asking endless questions about aliens and space travel. Tyler was more concerned with whether their new home had good hiding spots for fort building. As she tucked them in, Emma asked, "Mommy, did you see the dragon today?" "Yes, sweetheart." "Was he scary?" Sarah thought about those golden eyes, the weight of sorrow they carried. "No, baby. He wasn't scary. He was just very, very sad. Sadder than you were when Daddy left." The question hit Sarah unexpectedly hard. She sat on the edge of Emma's bed, considering how to answer honestly without burdening her daughter with adult complications. "Maybe sadder than I've ever seen anyone, Emma. But you know what? Even the saddest people can find reasons to smile again, if someone cares enough to help them remember how." That night, as Sarah lay in her new bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the Institute, she found herself thinking about Kirathen. What did it feel like to be the last of your kind? To carry the weight of an entire species' extinction? What guilt could be so overwhelming that even the instinct for survival couldn't overcome it? She thought about her own children, how the divorce had shattered their small world, how they'd each found different ways to cope with abandonment and change. Emma had become almost obsessively responsible, taking care of Tyler and trying to anticipate Sarah's needs. Tyler had retreated into imagination and play, creating worlds where he had control and security. How did a being who had lived for centuries, who had known the bonds of an empathic family, cope with absolute loss? The next morning, Sarah began her real work. She spent hours in the observation room, simply watching Kirathen, noting the patterns of his movement, the way he positioned himself in relation to the space around him. She noticed that he always kept his back to one particular wall, the way a wounded animal might protect its vulnerability. She saw how he would sometimes lift his great head as if listening for something that never came. Dr. Yamoto found her there during lunch break. "Any insights yet?" "He's waiting," Sarah said without taking her eyes off the Draknari. "Waiting for what?" "I don't know yet. But watch how he positions himself. He's not just hiding or protecting himself. He's waiting for something or someone. The question is what and how long he's been waiting." That afternoon, Sarah made her first direct attempt at communication. She had the observation room's intercom connected to the medical bay, allowing her to speak directly to Kirathen. "Hello, Kirathen. My name is Sarah Martinez. I'm here to listen, if you'd like to talk." The great dragon's head lifted slightly, golden eyes focusing on the observation window. For a moment, Sarah thought he might respond. Then, he lowered his head again, settling into his guarded position. "I know you understand me," Sarah continued, "and I know you're in pain. I'm not here to force anything on you. I'm just here if you decide you want someone to listen." She kept talking for nearly an hour, not asking questions, not demanding responses, just offering her presence. She talked about small things, about her children, about the weather outside, about anything that might convey normalcy and peace. When she finally stopped, she thought she detected the slightest shift in Kirathen's position, as if he had been listening after all. As Sarah walked back to her quarters that evening, she found Emma and Tyler in the children's wing, engaged in an animated conversation with Dr. Chun about the different alien species the Institute had encountered. Emma's eyes were bright with curiosity, and Tyler was building something elaborate with the educational blocks. "How was your first day with the dragon, Mommy?" Emma asked as they walked back to their quarters together. "Quiet," Sarah admitted. "He's not ready to talk yet. Maybe he just needs to know it's safe first," Emma said with the wisdom of a child who had learned that trust takes time to rebuild. Sarah looked down at her daughter, struck once again by how much children understood about healing and hope. "Maybe he does, sweetheart. Maybe he does." That night, as Sarah reviewed the cultural files on Draknari's social structure, she began to form a theory about Kirathen's guilt and his resistance to help. But understanding and proving were different things, and reaching him would require something more than knowledge. It would require patience, empathy, and the kind of stubborn hope that kept single mothers going when everything seemed impossible. As she drifted off to sleep, Sarah found herself thinking about Emma's words. Maybe Kirathen just needed to know it was safe first. The question was how to convince a dying dragon that the world still held reasons to trust when everything he had ever loved was gone. Sarah's breakthrough came on the fourth day, not through words, but through silence. She had been sitting in the observation room for 3 hours, not speaking, just being present while Kirathen lay in his protective curl. The medical staff had grown increasingly agitated about his deteriorating condition. His bio-readings were dropping, and Dr. Yamoto had mentioned that they might need to consider more aggressive interventions soon. But Sarah had noticed something the medical team hadn't. Every time someone discussed forcing treatment, every time voices were raised in urgency or frustration, Kirathen's energy readings spiked defensively. The more pressure they applied, the more he withdrew. So Sarah sat in silence, occasionally sipping her coffee, sometimes reading quietly from her tablet, but mostly just being peacefully present. She had learned this technique with traumatized children, the power of offering non-threatening companionship without expectations. Around noon, Kirathen's great head lifted slowly. For the first time since her arrival, his golden eyes met hers directly through the observation window. Sarah felt the weight of that gaze, ancient and searching. She set down her tablet and looked back calmly, offering a small nod of acknowledgement. "Hello," she said softly into the intercom. "I'm still here." Kirathen studied her for a long moment, then did something unexpected. He shifted his position slightly, no longer turning his back to the observation window. It was a small change, but significant. He was acknowledging her presence, accepting it. "Thank you," Sarah said, understanding the gift he'd just given her. That evening, as Sarah helped Emma with homework in their quarters, she found herself thinking about the moment of connection. Emma was working on a writing assignment about families, and Tyler was coloring at the same table, his tongue poking out in concentration. "Mommy," Emma said, looking up from her paper, "what makes someone family?" Sarah paused, considering the question carefully. "Well, what do you think makes someone family? I used to think it was people who lived together and had the same last name. But Tommy in my class says his real family is his foster parents, not his birth parents. And Mrs. Chun told us today about how some alien species make families out of people who aren't even related." "Smart observations," Sarah said, sitting down beside her daughter. "I think family is people who choose to love and take care of each other, even when it's hard. Like how we're a family, even though Daddy doesn't live with us anymore." "Exactly like that." Tyler looked up from his coloring. "Is the sad dragon all alone with no family?" Sarah's throat tightened. "Yes, sweetheart. His family is gone." "That's really sad," Tyler said solemnly. "Maybe we could be his family now." The simplicity of the suggestion hit Sarah like a lightning bolt. Family. Belonging. The Draknari social structure was built entirely around family units, around the empathic bonds that connected individuals into a greater whole. Kirathen wasn't just the last of a species. He was a being whose entire identity was built around family connection, and he was completely alone. That night, Sarah stayed up late reading everything she could find about Draknari family structures and social bonds. What she discovered both fascinated and horrified her. Draknari didn't just live in family groups. They existed in a state of constant low-level empathic connection with their family members. They could feel each other's emotions, share experiences, communicate on levels that went far beyond verbal language. The loss of his family wasn't just emotional devastation for Kira Thin. It was the equivalent of losing his senses, of being cut off from the very thing that defined his existence as a sentient being. But there was something else in the research that gave Sarah hope. Several anthropological studies mentioned that Draknari could form empathic bonds with non-family members in extreme circumstances. It was rare, and it required intense trust and emotional connection, but it was possible. The next morning, Sarah changed her approach entirely. Instead of going to the observation room, she asked Dr. Yamoto to have Kira Thin's food and water brought to a location where he could see the main corridor. Then, she established a routine. Every morning at 10, she would walk past his viewing area with Emma and Tyler on their way to the children's educational wing. Every afternoon at 3, she would pass by again when she picked them up. And every evening at 6, they would walk past on their way to dinner. At first, Kira Thin seemed indifferent to their presence. But Sarah noticed that he began positioning himself where he could observe the corridor during those times. She also noticed that his energy readings were slightly more stable during the periods when they were visible. On the third day of this routine, Tyler broke away from her hand and pressed his face against the reinforced viewing window. "Hi, Dragon," he called out cheerfully, his 6-year-old voice echoing in the corridor. "I'm Tyler." Kira Thin's head snapped up, golden eyes focusing on the small boy with sudden intensity. For a moment, Sarah held her breath, worried about how the Draknari might react to such direct contact. But instead of withdrawing or showing aggression, Kira Thin moved closer to the window, studying Tyler with what looked like curiosity. Tyler waved enthusiastically. "We're going to art class. Do you want to see my picture when I'm done?" Before Sarah could explain that the dragon couldn't understand his words, Kira Thin did something remarkable. He lifted one massive claw and placed it gently against the window where Tyler's small hand was pressed on the other side. Emma gasped softly. "Mommy, I think he likes Tyler." "I think you're right, sweetheart." That afternoon, Tyler insisted on showing his artwork to Kira Thin. It was a crayon drawing of their family, stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. But he'd added something new, a large blue figure with wings standing next to them. "See?" Tyler held the picture up to the window. "That's you. You're part of our picture family now." Kira Thin studied the drawing for a long time, and Sarah could have sworn she saw something shift in those ancient eyes. Not quite hope, but perhaps the first crack in the wall of despair he'd built around himself. Dr. Chun found Sarah in the observation room later that evening. "His bio readings have stabilized. We're not sure what changed, but he's no longer deteriorating. He's not dying anymore," Sarah said quietly, watching Kira Thin arrange himself in a position where he could see the corridor. "He's starting to remember what it feels like to be connected to something." "Connected to your children, you mean?" "Connected to the possibility of family again." Over the following days, the routine expanded. Emma began bringing her homework to do near the viewing window, reading aloud from her books. Tyler continued his artistic presentations, creating increasingly elaborate drawings that always included their dragon friend. And Sarah began staying after her children left, talking quietly to Kira Thin about her day, her thoughts, her concerns. The breakthrough came during the second week. Sarah was telling Kira Thin about a difficult decision she was facing regarding Emma's schooling when he finally spoke. "The young ones, they are yours." His voice was deep, resonant, speaking perfect English through the translation system. Sarah's heart leaped, but she kept her voice calm. "Yes, Emma is 8, Tyler is 6. They have no father bond." Sarah hesitated, then decided on honesty. Their father chose to leave. It's just the three of us now. Kira Thin was quiet for a long moment. Broken wing, he said softly. I am Sore. In my language, broken wing. When the family structure is damaged. I thought humans did not suffer this way. We do. Maybe not as intensely as Draknari, but we feel the loss when family bonds are broken. Yet you continue. You care for the young ones despite the broken wing. They're my children. Love doesn't stop because relationships end. Kira Thin moved closer to the window, studying her face. Your wing is broken, but you build new connections. With the young ones. With others. Sarah realized he was asking about her willingness to form new bonds despite being hurt. Yes, it takes time and courage, but yes. Sometimes broken wings can be rebuilt stronger than before. My wing is not broken, Kira Thin said quietly. My wing is gone. There is no rebuilding from nothing. Maybe not rebuilding, Sarah agreed. But maybe building something new? Kira Thin didn't respond, but he didn't withdraw either. Progress. That night, Emma asked the question that had been building for days. Mommy, why won't the dragon doctors help him get better? Sarah sat down on Emma's bed, choosing her words carefully. Sometimes, sweetheart, when someone is hurt in their heart, not just their body, regular medicine can't fix it. They have to want to get better, and they have to believe that getting better is worth it. So he doesn't think it's worth it to get better. He's forgotten that it is. He's forgotten that there are good things in the world worth living for. Emma was quiet for a moment, then said, maybe we should show him more good things. The next day, Emma put her plan into action. She convinced the art teacher to let her class make welcome cards for Kira Thin. Soon, the viewing window was decorated with dozens of colorful drawings and messages. We hope you feel better. Dragons are awesome. Welcome to Earth. Tyler, not to be outdone, began a daily show and tell session, bringing different toys and treasures to share. His favorite stuffed elephant, a rock collection, a book about spaceships. Each item came with enthusiastic explanations that Kira Thin listened to with what appeared to be growing amusement. But it was the evening of Emma's school presentation that changed everything. Emma had been working on a project about families around the world, and she asked if she could present it to Kira Thin first for practice. Sarah agreed, thinking it would be good for both Emma's confidence and Kira Thin's continued socialization. Emma stood proudly in front of the viewing window with her poster board, pointing to pictures and charts as she spoke. Families come in lots of different shapes, she began. Some families have a mom and a dad and kids. Some families have grandparents. Some families are just one parent and children. Some families are people who choose to love each other, even if they're not related by blood. She pointed to a section of her poster that showed various family configurations. The most important thing about families is that they take care of each other and love each other no matter what. Even when things are hard, even when people make mistakes, even when everything seems impossible. Kira Thin had moved as close to the window as possible, his attention completely focused on Emma's words. Sometimes, Emma continued, families get broken. People leave or die or just can't be together anymore. It's really sad, and it hurts a lot. But you know what? Even when your old family is gone, you can make a new family. It might be different, and it might take time, but love finds a way to make new connections. She looked directly at Kira Thin through the window. Like us, our old family broke when Daddy left. But we made a new family that's just us three. And now we're making it bigger by including friends who need love too. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes as she watched her 8-year-old daughter, in her simple, honest way, explain the very concept that Kira Thin needed to understand. So even though you lost your old family, Emma concluded, you don't have to be alone forever. You can make a new family with people who care about you. Like us, we care about you. The silence that followed was profound. Kira Thin stared at Emma for a long moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, he placed his massive head against the window glass. His eyes closed, and Sarah could see his shoulders shaking. He was crying, not the dramatic sobs of human grief, but the deep, resonant sound of a being who had held back tears for decades finally, allowing himself to feel the full weight of his loss, and perhaps the first hint of hope for healing. Tyler pressed his small hand against the window again. "It's okay to be sad," he said solemnly. "Mommy says crying helps wash the hurt out so new happy can get in." When Kirathin finally lifted his head, his golden eyes were clearer than Sarah had seen them since her arrival. "Little Wing," he said, using what Sarah realized was a term of endearment in Draknari culture. "You speak of building new families. But what of one whose very nature requires bonds that your species cannot provide? What of empathic connection that cannot be replaced?" Emma, with the fearless curiosity of childhood, asked, "What's empathic connection?" Sarah started to intervene, to explain that it was complicated, but Kirathin answered directly. "It means feeling what others feel, knowing their hearts as well as your own, being connected in spirit as well as affection." "Oh," Emma said thoughtfully, "like how I can tell when Mommy is worried, even when she tries to hide it, or how Tyler always knows when I'm scared before I even say anything." Kirathin stared at her in apparent shock. "You sense each other's emotions?" "Of course," Tyler piped up. "Families do that. That's how you know when someone needs a hug." Sarah realized with growing amazement that her children were casually describing abilities that many humans possessed, but rarely acknowledged. The intuitive emotional connections between family members, the way children could sense their parents' moods, the unspoken communication that existed between people who truly knew each other. "It's not the same as your empathic bonds," Sarah said carefully to Kirathin. "But humans do have the capacity for deep emotional connection and intuitive understanding, especially within families." Kirathin was quiet for so long that Sarah began to worry they had overwhelmed him. But when he finally spoke, his voice held a note she hadn't heard before. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "the bonds need not be identical to be real." That night, for the first time since his arrival, Kirathin accepted medical treatment. Not much, just a basic nutritional supplement, but it was a start. More importantly, he asked Dr. Yamoto to arrange for communication equipment that would allow him to speak directly with Sarah and her children without the intercom system. As Sarah tucked her children into bed that night, Emma asked, "Do you think he'll get better now?" "I think," Sarah said, smoothing her daughter's hair, "that he's remembered something important today. He's remembered that love doesn't always come in the same package, but it's still love. And love is always worth fighting for." Tyler, already half asleep, mumbled, "Good. I like having a dragon in our family." Sarah smiled, kissing both her children goodnight. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new steps in Kirathin's healing journey. But tonight, for the first time since taking this assignment, she felt genuine hope. A dying dragon had remembered that he didn't have to die alone. And a small, makeshift human family had learned that sometimes the most profound healing comes not from grand gestures, but from the simple willingness to include someone in your circle of love. Outside their window, the lights of the research facility twinkled like stars, and somewhere in the medical wing, an ancient being who had thought himself beyond saving was taking his first steps toward choosing life over grief. The impossible was happening, one small act of family love at a time. 2 weeks after Kirathin began accepting treatment, the real work of healing started. His body was responding well to the medical interventions, but Sarah could see that his spirit remained fragile, like a bone that had been broken and reset, but wasn't yet strong enough to bear full weight. The communication equipment Dr. Yamoto had installed allowed for clearer conversations, and Sarah began spending her mornings in what had become their informal counseling sessions. Emma and Tyler would visit in the afternoons, their natural ease with Kirathin continuing to work small miracles in his recovery. But it was during one of these morning sessions that Sarah finally learned the full extent of Kirathin's guilt and why he had resisted healing for so long. "You wish to know why I came to human space," he said, his voice carrying the weight of confession. "Why the last Draknari travels so far from his homeworld." "Only if you want to tell me," Sarah replied, settling into the chair she'd placed near the window. Over the weeks, their conversations had developed a rhythm of patience and trust. Kirathin was quiet for a long moment, his golden eyes focused somewhere beyond the walls of his medical bay. I was not supposed to be the last. I was supposed to die with the rest of them. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What do you mean? The plague that destroyed my people, it was not natural. It was created by the ZH-Kree, a species we had disagreed with over territorial rights. The biological weapon was designed specifically for our physiology. There was no cure, no treatment, no escape. He shifted his massive form, and Sarah could see the old pain in every line of his posture. I was off-world when it happened. A diplomatic mission to a neutral system, trying to negotiate trade agreements. My entire wing, my mate, my offspring, my parents, my siblings, they were all on Drachnos when the plague hit. Sarah's heart broke for him. I'm so sorry. I received the emergency transmission 3 days after the plague was released. By the time I could return, everyone was dead. Not just my wing, not just my city, everyone. Hundreds of millions of Drachnari, gone in a matter of weeks. He lifted his great head, meeting her eyes through the window. But the worst part, Sarah Martinez, is that I could have stopped it. What do you mean? The ZH-Kree had approached me months before. They offered a deal. If I would convince the High Council to cede the disputed territories, they would share their new medical technologies with us. I refused. I thought it was just another negotiation tactic, another attempt at political pressure. Sarah began to understand the true nature of his guilt. You think refusing their offer caused the plague? I know it did. 3 days before I left for the diplomatic mission, I received another message from them. They told me explicitly that refusal of their terms would result in consequences my people could not survive. I thought they meant war. I thought they meant conventional weapons. I never imagined. His voice broke, the first time Sarah had heard him lose emotional control. If I had agreed to their terms, if I had convinced the council to give up those worthless rocks and ice, my species would still exist. Sarah sat in silence for several minutes, processing the magnitude of his burden. This wasn't just survivor's guilt. It was the belief that his single decision had led to genocide. Kirathin, she said finally, have you considered that the ZH-Kree might have been planning this regardless of your response? What do you mean? You said the biological weapon was designed specifically for Drachnari physiology. That kind of targeted weapon doesn't get developed overnight. They would have been working on it for years, maybe decades. Your refusal might have been the excuse they used, but it probably wasn't the cause. You think they would have deployed it anyway? I think species capable of genocide don't need reasons. They need excuses. And if you hadn't given them that excuse, they would have found another one. But if I had been there, you would have died with the rest of them, and there would be no Drachnari left at all. No one to remember them, to carry their history, to ensure their culture doesn't disappear completely. Sarah leaned forward, willing him to understand. Kirathin, you surviving wasn't a failure. It was the only thing that prevented total extinction. You're not the Drachnari who failed to save his people. You're the Drachnari who ensured they wouldn't be forgotten. She could see him struggling with this perspective, decades of guilt warring with the logical possibility that she might be right. Even if what you say is true, he said slowly, what purpose is there in continuing? I'm a last. When I die, the Drachnari die with me. What is the point of prolonging that inevitable ending? It was Emma who answered that question, though she didn't know it at the time. That afternoon, the children arrived for their usual visit to find Kirathin in a particularly withdrawn mood. Sarah had filled them in on age-appropriate details about why their dragon friend was sad, explaining that he blamed himself for something terrible that wasn't really his fault. Tyler, with his 6-year-old directness, climbed onto his usual chair and pressed his face to the window. Kirathin, why are you being silly? Tyler, Emma hissed, embarrassed by her brother's bluntness. But Kirathin lifted his head, curious despite his pain. Silly little one? Yeah. Mommy says you think it's your fault that your family died, but that's silly. Bad people who hurt others are the only ones who should feel bad about hurting others. Emma, inspired by her brother's approach, added. And besides, even if everything bad that ever happened was somehow your fault, which it's not, you're still important. Why? Kira then asked, and Sarah could hear genuine curiosity in his voice. Because you're the only one who remembers them, Emma exclaimed. My teacher says that people don't really die as long as someone remembers them and tells their stories. So as long as you're alive, all the other dragons are still a little bit alive too. Tyler nodded vigorously. Like how Great-Grandma Rose is still part of our family, even though she died before I was born, because Mommy tells us stories about her. And Emma continued, warming to her theme, you could tell us stories about your family. Then we'd remember them too, and when we have kids someday, we could tell them the stories, and then dragon families would never really be gone. Sarah watched Kirathan's face as her children, in their innocent wisdom, offered him something that decades of guilt had hidden from him. Purpose beyond survival. You would want to hear stories about my people? He asked quietly. Yes, both children exclaimed simultaneously. Can you tell us about dragon families? Tyler asked. Were they like human families? Kirathan settled into a more comfortable position, and for the first time since Sarah had known him, she saw something that might have been the beginning of peace in his golden eyes. Dragon families, he began slowly, are called wings, and they are different from human families in many ways, but the same in the most important way of all. Sarah listened as Kirathan began to tell stories of his people, describing their culture, their bonds, their ways of life. With each tale, she could see him growing stronger, not just physically, but spiritually. He was remembering not just the loss, but the love that made the loss meaningful. Over the following days, these storytelling sessions became a regular part of their routine. Kirathan would share memories of his homeworld, his family, the great achievements, and small joys of Draknari life. Emma and Tyler listened with rapt attention, asking questions that showed they truly cared about understanding this alien culture. But it was Dr. Chun who pointed out the larger significance of what was happening. Sarah, she said, finding her in the observation room one evening after the children had gone to bed, do you realize what your family is accomplishing here? Helping one individual heal from trauma, I hope. More than that, Kirathan is sharing cultural and historical information that we never could have learned any other way. His people left very few records that we could access or understand. But the stories he's telling your children, we're recording them with his permission. We're preserving an entire civilization's legacy. Sarah felt the weight of that realization. He's not just healing. He's fulfilling his purpose as the last of his kind. Exactly. And your children aren't just helping him remember that life is worth living. They're helping him understand that his life has meaning beyond his own survival. That night, Sarah found herself thinking about purpose and legacy, about the ways that love could transform even the deepest grief into something meaningful. She thought about her own children, how they had adapted to their changed family structure, how they had grown stronger and more empathetic through experiencing loss and rebuilding. The next morning brought an unexpected development. Kirathan made a request that surprised everyone. I would like to see more of this facility, he announced, and I would like to meet others of your kind. Dr. Yamoto was hesitant. Are you sure you're ready for that level of interaction? Your medical status is still. My body grows stronger each day. But more than that, my spirit requires connection. I have learned from the small ones that isolation is not healing. I would like to contribute to this place that has given me back my life. Sarah felt a surge of pride and happiness. This was more than recovery. This was reintegration into life, into community. The introduction of Kirathan to the wider Institute community was handled carefully and gradually. First, small groups of researchers and staff were brought to meet him in his medical bay. Then, as his strength improved, he was given access to larger spaces within the facility. The impact was immediate and profound. Kirathan's knowledge of advanced biotechnology, his understanding of interspecies communication, his perspectives on cosmic history. He became not just a patient, but a valuable member of the research community. But more than his intellectual contributions, Kirathin brought something else to the Institute, a living example of resilience and hope. Staff members who had lost loved ones, researchers struggling with failed projects, students discouraged by setbacks. They all found inspiration in the story of the last dragon who chose to build new connections rather than surrender to despair. Emma and Tyler became minor celebrities as the children who had befriended a dragon. But more importantly, they continued to maintain their special relationship with Kirathin, visiting him daily, sharing their school experiences, and continuing to listen to his stories. It was during one of these visits that Kirathin made an announcement that would change everything. "Little wings," he said to Emma and Tyler, "I've been thinking about something important. You have taught me that families can be chosen, not just born. You have shown me that love creates bonds that are real even when they are different from what we have known before." Emma and Tyler listened with the serious attention they always gave their dragon friend. "I have a question to ask," Kirathin continued, looking from the children to Sarah. "I understand that humans have ceremonies when they choose to make their families official, when they decide that their chosen bonds are permanent and recognized." Sarah felt her breath catch. Was he asking what she thought he was asking? "What I wish to know is this. Would it be possible for a dragon to be formally adopted into a human family? Would you consider making our chosen bonds official?" Emma gasped with delight. Tyler clapped his hands, and Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. "Kirathin," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "there's nothing in the world we'd like more." The adoption ceremony, when it finally took place 3 weeks later, was unlike anything the Institute had ever hosted. Representatives from multiple alien species attended, along with human officials, researchers, staff, and friends. It wasn't legally binding in any traditional sense, but it was emotionally and spiritually complete. Dr. Chun officiated, reading vows that had been crafted to honor both human and Draknari traditions. Emma and Tyler each made speeches about what it meant to have a dragon brother. Sarah spoke about how Kirathin had taught her children about resilience and hope. But it was Kirathin's words that brought tears to every eye in attendance. "I came to this place dying," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the translation system. "Not just in body, but in spirit. I believe that the last Draknari should die alone, carrying his guilt and grief into the darkness." He looked at Sarah and her children, his golden eyes bright with emotion. "But this family taught me that endings can become beginnings. They showed me that love doesn't require identical nature, only willing hearts. They gave me something I thought was lost forever, the chance to be part of a wing again." He paused, and when he continued, his voice was strong and clear. "I am no longer the last Draknari dying alone. I am Kirathin Martinez, brother and uncle, keeper of memories and builder of new traditions. I am part of something greater than myself once again." As the ceremony concluded with a mixing of human and Draknari blessing rituals, Sarah looked around at the faces surrounding them. Scientists and researchers, children and adults, beings from multiple species, all gathered to witness the impossible, a family that transcended every boundary of biology and culture. That night, as Sarah tucked Emma and Tyler into bed, they chattered excitedly about their dragon brother, about the ceremony, about all the people who had come to celebrate with them. "Mommy," Emma said as Sarah kissed her goodnight, "do you think Daddy would be surprised that we have a dragon in our family now?" Sarah considered the question seriously. "I think Daddy would be amazed at how strong and loving and brave his children have become." Tyler, already half asleep, mumbled, "Dragons make families better." As Sarah turned out the lights and headed to her own room, she reflected on the truth of Tyler's simple statement. Kirathin had made their family better, but they had made his life possible again. Together, they had proven that love could triumph over loss, that hope could be rebuilt from the smallest gestures of acceptance, and that families were defined not by blood or species, but by the willingness to choose each other day after day. In the medical wing, now converted to comfortable living quarters, Kirathin settled in for the night. For the first time in decades, he was not alone. He was part of a wing again, strange and wonderful and completely different from anything his people had ever imagined. But love, he had learned, was the universal constant. And tomorrow, his human family would visit again, bringing stories and laughter and the unshakable certainty that he belonged somewhere in the vast universe. The impossible had become inevitable. A dying dragon had found reasons not just to live, but to thrive. 6 months after the adoption ceremony, Sarah stood in the newly constructed Cultural Preservation Wing of the Institute, watching as Kirathin demonstrated traditional Draknari storytelling techniques to a group of fascinated xenoanthropologists. His massive form dominated the specially designed amphitheater, but his voice was gentle as he wove tales of his people's history into something that could be understood and preserved by other species. The Draknari believed that memories shared become eternal. He was explaining, his golden eyes reflecting the warm lighting designed to mimic his homeworld sun. When we told stories of our ancestors, we did not just remember them. We made them present again, alive in the telling. Dr. Sarah Martinez-Chun, as she was now known professionally, felt a familiar surge of pride watching her adopted brother at work. The hyphenated name had been her idea, a way to honor both her human heritage and her connection to the Institute family that had supported them through everything. "Mommy, look." Tyler's voice drew her attention to where he and Emma were working on their own project in the corner of the amphitheater. At 9 and 7 respectively, they had become integral parts of the cultural preservation program, helping to make the recorded Draknari stories accessible to children of various species. Tyler held up a tablet displaying his latest illustration, a colorful interpretation of the Draknari coming-of-age ceremony that Kirathin had described the previous week. Emma was narrating the story into a recording device, her 11-year-old voice clear and engaging as she translated ancient rituals into language that young minds could understand. The young dragons had to learn to fly between the twin moons of Drachnos, Emma read from her script. But the hardest part wasn't the flying. It was learning to trust their family's empathic guidance when they couldn't see where they were going. Sarah smiled, thinking about how appropriate that particular story was for all of them. They had all learned to navigate by trusting connections they couldn't fully see or understand. Mrs. Martinez-Chun, Dr. Patel, one of the newer researchers, approached with a tablet full of data. "We've just received confirmation from the Galactic Cultural Council. They've officially recognized the Draknari Preservation Project as a Class 1 heritage site. Full funding, permanent protection status, and priority access to any future archaeological discoveries." Sarah accepted the tablet with hands that trembled slightly. This meant security for their work, for Kirathin's stories, for the legacy of an entire species. It also meant something else, something she hadn't dared to hope for when this journey began. "There's more," Dr. Patel continued, clearly excited. "The Council wants to establish a new department here at the Institute. Interspecies Family Dynamics, with you as the department head. They believe our success with Kirathin represents a breakthrough in understanding how emotional connections can transcend biological boundaries." Before Sarah could respond, a familiar warm voice spoke from behind her. "Congratulations, Sister Wing. Your work has always deserved such recognition." Sarah turned to find Kirathin approaching, having finished his presentation. Even after all these months, she was sometimes struck by how different he looked from the dying, broken being she had first encountered. His scales gleamed with health, his movements were fluid and strong, and his eyes held a light that spoke of purpose and contentment. "Our work," Sarah corrected gently. "This is all of ours." "Indeed," Kirathin agreed, settling into his preferred resting position near where Emma and Tyler continued their illustration work. "Though I must admit, I have news of my own to share." Emma and Tyler immediately abandoned their tablets and rushed over, climbing onto the specially designed platforms that allowed them to comfortably interact with their dragon brother at eye level. "What kind of news?" Emma asked, her eyes bright with curiosity. "The kind that may change our family dynamic once again," Kirithen said, and Sarah caught a note of nervous excitement in his voice. "Are you sick again?" Tyler asked with the direct concern of a 7-year-old. "No, Little Wing. I am healthier than I have been in decades. But I have been contacted by representatives of several species who have heard about our preservation work. It seems there are others who face similar situations to what mine once was." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. "What do you mean?" 3 different species have reached out to the Cultural Council. One has only 12 individuals remaining after a planetary disaster. Another has lost their home world and scattered across the galaxy, struggling to maintain their cultural connections. The third is dealing with a plague that, while not fatal, has severely damaged their natural empathic abilities. Kirithen paused, looking carefully at each member of his human family. "They have asked if I would be willing to work with them to help them find ways to preserve their cultures and rebuild their family structures. And they have specifically requested that I bring my human family with me." "You mean travel?" Sarah asked, her mind immediately jumping to logistics, safety concerns, and the implications for her children's education and stability. "I mean become part of something larger than we ever imagined," Kirithen replied. "The Council wants to establish a mobile unit, a ship capable of traveling to different worlds and systems, bringing our approach to species facing extinction, cultural loss, or family structure breakdown." Tyler clapped his hands. "A spaceship? We'd live on a spaceship. The initial assignment would be 5 years," Kirithen continued, "with the option to extend if we choose. The ship would be designed to accommodate our specific family needs, including educational facilities for Emma and Tyler, research laboratories for Sarah, and cultural preservation equipment for our work." Emma, always the more cautious of the 2 children, asked the practical questions Sarah was formulating. "What about our friends here? What about Mr. Whiskers? What about the other people who work with us?" "All excellent questions, Wise Wing," Kirithen said approvingly. "Mr. Whiskers would, of course, come with us. The ship would be staffed with a core team from the Institute, including many of the people we work with now. And we would return to Earth regularly for resupply and reporting." Sarah found herself thinking about the little apartment they had left behind when they first came to the Institute, about the dreams she'd had as a young graduate student, about the way her children had grown and flourished when given the chance to be part of something larger than their small, broken family. "What do you think?" she asked Emma and Tyler. "This would be a big adventure, but also a big responsibility. Would we still be a family?" Tyler asked with 7-year-old wisdom that cut straight to the heart of the matter. "We would always be a family," Kirithen assured him. "Wing bonds do not weaken with distance or change. If anything, shared adventure might make us stronger." Emma bit her lip, thinking hard. "Would we be helping other people like we helped Kirithen?" "Yes, sweetheart," Sarah confirmed. "We'd be helping entire species learn how to rebuild families and preserve their cultures when everything seems lost. Like how we learned to rebuild our family after Daddy left." Emma asked. Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. "Exactly like that." Tyler jumped up and down on his platform. "I want to do it. I want to help space families." Emma was quieter, but Sarah could see the excitement building in her eyes. "It would be like being ambassadors of hope, wouldn't it?" "That's a beautiful way to put it," Kirithen said warmly. "Ambassadors of hope. I could not have described our mission better myself." Sarah looked around at the Cultural Preservation Wing, at the work they had built together, at the evidence of what was possible when different species chose to trust each other enough to form real bonds. Then she looked at her children and her dragon brother, this impossible family that had grown from the ashes of loss and disappointment into something stronger than she had ever imagined possible. "When would we leave?" she asked. "The ship construction will take 18 months, Kirithen replied. "Plenty of time to prepare, to complete current projects, to say proper goodbyes. And to train," Sarah added, her practical mind already working through the requirements. I imagine there's a lot we'll need to learn about different species, different cultural frameworks, different approaches to family and connection. Indeed, the Council is prepared to provide extensive training for all of us. Emma and Tyler would receive specialized education in xenocultural studies and interspecies communication. Emma grinned suddenly. We're going to be the best educated kids in the galaxy. You already are, Kirathan assured her. Your emotional intelligence and cultural adaptability are beyond anything the Council has seen in beings your age. That evening, as Sarah helped her children process the magnitude of the decision they were facing, she found herself reflecting on how far they had all come. 2.5 years ago, she had been a divorced, single mother struggling to make ends meet, afraid to take risks because she couldn't afford to fail when her children depended on her. "Mommy," Tyler said as she tucked him into bed, "are you scared about the spaceship adventure?" Sarah considered lying, giving him the confident reassurance that parents usually offer their children. Instead, she chose honesty. "A little scared, sweetheart, but excited scared, not bad scared. Like when we first came to the Institute and everything was new and different. But it worked out good," Tyler pointed out. "It worked out better than I ever imagined possible." Emma, overhearing from her own bed, added, "And we'll be together. The four of us." "The four of us," Sarah agreed, including their cat in the count that somehow never felt complete anymore, without mentioning Kirathan. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood once again in front of a decision that would reshape their lives. But this time, she wasn't alone. The Institute's main conference room was filled with the colleagues and friends who had become their extended family over the past 2 years. Director Chen, Dr. Yamoto, Dr. Patel, and dozens of others who had supported their work and welcomed them into the community. "The vote is unanimous," Director Chen announced with a broad smile. "The Institute not only supports your participation in the Galactic Cultural Preservation Initiative, we're honored to be your home base and primary support system." Kirathan, who had squeezed his massive form into the conference room for this moment, rumbled with pleasure. "The support of this community has been essential to our healing and growth. Knowing that we will remain connected to you makes this new adventure possible." Emma and Tyler, who had been fidgeting throughout the formal proceedings, finally couldn't contain themselves any longer. "Does this mean we're really going to space?" Tyler burst out. "This means," Sarah said, looking around at all the faces that had become dear to them, "that are going to take everything we've learned about love and family and hope, and we're going to share it with beings who need to remember that impossible things are possible. And we're going to learn things too," Emma added thoughtfully, "about how other species make families and tell stories and take care of each other." As the meeting broke up into celebration and planning discussions, Sarah found herself in conversation with Dr. Chun about the practical details of their upcoming adventure. "The ship they're designing sounds incredible," Dr. Chun said, showing Sarah the preliminary specifications. "Living quarters that can be reconfigured for different family structures, universal translation systems, cultural immersion, holographic environments. They're really building this around your specific approach." "It's overwhelming sometimes," Sarah admitted. 3 years ago, I was worried about making rent. Now we're about to become the galaxy's premier experts on interspecies family dynamics." "You were always experts," Dr. Chin pointed out. "You just needed the right circumstances to show it. Your ability to create emotional connections across species barriers, your children's natural empathy and adaptability, Kirathan's knowledge and experience, you've built something unique." That night, as their family gathered in Kirathan's quarters for their traditional evening story time, Sarah listened to her dragon brother tell tales of distant worlds and ancient cultures, while Emma and Tyler contributed their own stories about the friends they hoped to help and the adventures they might have. "Tell the one about the crystal singers," Tyler requested, curling up against Kirathan's warm side. "The Veltar, Kiratenaskith." "Very well. But remember, this is not just a story for entertainment. Someday, we may encounter the descendants of these crystal singers, and understanding their cultural background will help us connect with them. As Kirathin began the tale of species that communicated through harmonic vibrations and built their families around shared musical experiences, Sarah felt a deep sense of rightness about the path they had chosen. This wasn't just about helping others. It was about continuing to grow and learn together, about proving that love really could transcend any boundary. 6 months later, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned ship Harmony, watching Earth grow smaller through the massive viewport. Emma and Tyler pressed their faces against the transparent aluminum, marveling at their first view of their home planet from space. "It's so beautiful," Emma whispered. "And so small," Tyler added with wonder. Kirathin moved up behind them, his massive head appearing in the reflection on the viewport. "Every world is beautiful and small from space, little wings. It is only when we get close that we see the complexity and wonder within. Like people," Emma said thoughtfully. "Exactly like people." Sarah felt Kirathin's gentle mental touch, the empathic connection that had grown stronger over the years as she learned to open herself to the possibility of communication beyond words. Through that connection, she felt his contentment, his excitement for their mission, his deep love for their strange, wonderful family. "Our first assignment is the Kethmori system," she told the children, reading from the mission briefing. 17 individuals remain from a species that once numbered in the billions. They're struggling to maintain their cultural identity and their family bonds with so few of them left. "Like Kirathin was," Tyler said with understanding. "Very much like I was," Kirathin agreed. "Which is why I believe we can help them find new ways to be a family, even when the old ways seem impossible." As their ship turned away from Earth and engaged its faster-than-light drive, Sarah felt a familiar mixture of anticipation and anxiety. But underlying both emotions was something stronger, the absolute certainty that they were exactly where they belonged, doing exactly what they were meant to do. Behind them, Earth continued its ancient rotation, home to the institute where their work had begun, where colleagues continued the research they had started. Ahead of them, 17 lonely individuals waited on a distant world, not knowing that help was coming in the form of an impossible family that had learned to make hope from heartbreak. "Tell me again about the Kethmori," Emma asked, settling into her favorite spot near the viewport. Sarah pulled up the cultural files on her tablet. "They're aquatic, with natural telepathic abilities that were disrupted when their homeworld's magnetic field was damaged in a solar storm. They can no longer sense each other's emotions the way their species always has, and they don't know how to maintain family connections without that biological foundation. But we know how to do that," Tyler said confidently. "We know how to try," Sarah corrected gently. "Every species is different. Every situation is unique. But yes, we know something about building connections that don't depend on biology." As their ship carried them toward their first mission among the stars, Sarah reflected on the impossible journey that had brought them to this point. A dying dragon, 2 hurt children, and a divorced single mother had somehow become a family strong enough to carry hope across the galaxy. The Kethmori didn't know it yet, but they were about to discover that love could find a way to connect hearts across any distance, any difference, any barrier that seemed insurmountable. After all, if a human family could save a dying dragon by teaching him to trust in chosen bonds, imagine what was possible when that same family turned their attention to a species that just needed to remember how to hope. The impossible had become their specialty, and the galaxy was full of impossibilities waiting to be transformed into new kinds of families, new forms of love, new reasons to choose life over despair. As the stars streaked past their viewport, Sarah Martinshin smiled and began planning their approach to 17 lonely souls who didn't yet know that their isolation was about to end. Some families were born, others were made, and a very few were forged in the fire of loss and rebuilt from the ashes with such strength that they could carry hope to anyone who had forgotten how to believe in tomorrow. The harmony and Her crew were proof that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe was simply the stubborn refusal to let love be defeated by loss. And their mission was just beginning.